Welcome everybody back to Cumbria Wildlife Trust's podcast. This month we're going to be talking about mammals, very charismatic animals. We haven't spoken about these on the podcast up until now, and we're going to be talking about two completely different animals with different conservation status within Cumbria. First of all, Liz has been out to do an interview with Elizabeth Ogilvie, who is the resident ecologist at Lowther and has been overseeing their beaver project. And later on, Liz has also been out talking to our red squirrel ranger, Josh Adams. With me today on the podcast, I've got my boss, David Harpley. How are you, David?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, David, beavers, I know you've been quite involved in the whole Cumbria beaver reintroduction. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on.
Yeah, so I've been chair of the Cumbria Beaver Group, which the idea of that is to try and coordinate efforts to reintroduce beavers to Cumbria. There are currently 2 beaver release sites. There's the Lowther one and another one in South Cumbria. Both of them have now got young beavers, so they're both bred successfully. So the South Cumbria one bred last year, I think, and then the Lowther one's this year.
I know beavers are actually found in the wild in other places in the UK. How come we've still got ours in pens?
Well, that's to do with sort of governments and their decisions. The last government produced a very long consultation document basically listing all the benefits of having beavers living wild, but then came up with a set of conditions for doing a wild release that meant that virtually no one could actually do one. And then when people said, well, hold on a minute, this is ridiculous, they said they'd go away and think about it. And then that's what's been happening ever since. So it's all sat in limbo, really, waiting for someone higher up to make a decision either that, yes, we will allow free release or no, we won't. And then they'll have to decide what to do with the enclosed releases because obviously you can't have beavers endlessly breeding within a confined space.
Beavers do bring massive benefits, don't they, to the countryside?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of ecological benefits about ponds and woody debris in streams and so on, stuff like that. There are flooding benefits because you're slowing the flow of water. Oh, there's all sorts. The benefits really are very obvious.
They're known as ecosystem engineers, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they seem to create not just the wet habitats, but the scrubland habitats where they've cut the trees down and the trees start to regrow. It's a whole series of habitats that they create, isn't it?
Yeah. So lots and lots of sort of wetland trees have specific adaptations for coping with being eaten by beavers. So willow roots from fragments. And so as the beaver chews it up into bits, it reroots and starts to grow. Alder coppices really readily and grows back again.
So what are we waiting for? The Labour government to do something about this?
Yeah, pretty much. It's in a way completely academic because beavers are already living wild across much of England. They're just not living wild in our bit of England.
You and I saw them on the Tay, didn't we? There seems to be a lot of beavers in that part of Scotland.
Yeah. And spreading out from that population as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So really, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, it's just how much time. You could do it tomorrow if somebody gave you the green light, or you might have to wait decades until some spread from somewhere else.
Yeah. I think we've waffled on long enough. Why don't we go and listen to Liz then? Liz, our roving producer, has been out and about, and she went to the Lowther Beaver Enclosure with Elizabeth Ogilvie, who is their ecologist, to go and have a look at how the beavers are doing in this first year that they've had kits.
So here we are on the Lowther estate. And we've come to talk about beavers, but perhaps you could just tell me a little bit about what your role is.
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth, I'm the ecologist at the Lowther estate, and I've been here about a year. So we've had a large project here for about 5 years. We transitioned away from sort of quite intensive sheep farming towards more extensive grazing with cattle and ponies and pigs, just to try and have a gentler impact on the environment and try and give more space for nature and more nature-friendly farming.
And you made a very special introduction, didn't you, with the beavers?
Yeah, so towards the end of 2020, we managed to get a beaver pair. So Jim Lowther, who owns the estate, he's very enthusiastic on wildlife and restoring natural processes is what he's really keen on. So beavers, obviously everyone knows they're really important for building dams and creating wetlands and flooding areas. So we wanted to bring that back to the valley. Obviously it's been absent for at least 400 years. And we were just really fortunate that it was quite simple for us here. We didn't have any special sites that were going to be flooded. It's, fairly standard farmland that we were wanting to put them into. So we were lucky that we were able to get the beavers here at the end of 2020. So we've had a pair in our enclosure since then. It's been quite exciting seeing the pools growing and the water just totally changing the landscape. All the wetland that they've created has been a really big transformation.
Could you tell me something about the beavers here?
So both the beavers, they came from Scotland from the Beavers Trust. They've been really important in implementing all of this. We couldn't have done it without their help. So we've got a male beaver called Glenn. He's black, which is quite unusual. It's a recessive gene. So we're hopeful that maybe if we get enough of the recessive gene in our population, we might get more black beaver kits, which would be lovely. And then the female is Dragonfly, and she's a brown beaver, which definitely helps with looking at them on the camera trap. You can tell them apart really easily, the black male and the brown female.
And have you ever seen them?
Not myself, no, only on camera. So no, they're very, very shy, and obviously they're out at night. They spend most of the day in their lodge tucked up asleep, and then they come out at night. Occasionally I've heard sort of the odd noise, but never seen anything.
So whilst we're walking down to the river, can you tell me a bit about them?
Yeah, so they're lovely furry animals. They used to be sort of persecuted because people liked their fur so much. It's nice thick fur and waterproof and things that help them swim. But they're sort of about 1 metre long from nose to tail, and they've got this weird tail that helps them swim, and they use it for communicating as well in the water. They can do a big tail slap thing.
It's very flat, isn't it?
Yes, very flat. We can use it to sort of help them steer as they swim underwater.
Could they be mistaken for anything else, like an otter or something?
They're a lot chunkier than an otter. So we have had on the camera trap, actually, when we first had the kits, there was one video as well of an otter, and I was looking at it thinking, I'm sure that can't be a beaver. So they're really wide tail and much wider, broader face as well, and the big teeth on the front, so fairly hard to mistake.
And do they sleep all day?
Yes, yeah, so they're all tucked up asleep. They'll be in there at the moment. And then at night time, or sort of around dusk, they'll come out and they'll be cutting down trees and bringing food to their larder, sort of building their dams and extending their pools. And we've got videos as well of them coming out, and they like to eat the grass, especially in the summer. They'll come out and graze these little beaver lawns, and we'll be able to see some in a minute when we walk down, which is really sweet.
Fancy seeing a beaver lawn. But they don't eat fish, do they?
No, that's a common misconception, they eat fish, but they're completely vegetarian. Yeah, they wouldn't eat fish.
OK, well, let's carry on down and have a look at these wonderful engineering works they've been doing.
Yes. Yeah, so as we're walking down, actually, this woodland that we're passing here, the stream, it runs along the edge of the woodland, and the river, the main river, is down in the distance there, and it was fairly well a straight line along that edge. But they've already, even upstream at this end of the enclosure, there's a few pools they've built, and then you've got the biggest pool that we're heading towards in a moment. So you can see already how much they're holding water back and spreading it, changing the direction of the flow into the grassland.
So they've created this pond that we're heading for now?
Yes, that was entirely them, and it's incredible, and it's been growing a lot over the last couple of months. It's been quite amazing every time I come down and seeing, they've extended a bit more, I'll walk a bit further round. It is huge. We need to get a measure of it, because the amount of water that's holding, it must be vast.
We're not actually walking in the pond, even though it might sound like it with our wellies, but we're in the very wet surroundings. And the pond is completely surrounded by this dam, isn't it?
It's really lovely how the grass has grown up over the edge. I really like that. It's like someone's put turf on it, to make it look pretty. But yeah, you've got sticks sticking up all over the place. There's a few stones in there, and just anything they find, they'll just add to the dam. And we always say it's like an infinity pool, the way the water trickles over the edge like that. So it's beautiful.
It is like an infinity pool, isn't it?
And sometimes I've come down and there's been sort of fresh rushes they've put on. They've clearly just pulled up a whole chunk of rushes and just stuck it on the top. Yeah, it's always changing.
So Elizabeth, they're the only animals that can do this, aren't they?
Yeah, beavers are very special. They're referred to as a keystone species, and by creating these pools and wetland and felling the trees, and then you get dead wood and wet dead wood, which is really important for insects. And then even through creation of their lodge, you get birds will nest on the top of the lodge because it's this big pile of sticks. And in the ponds, we've had moorhens breeding around the edges of the ponds, and then the greylags have been swimming about and grazing in the wet grassland that they've created as well. So they're very special.
But what's in it for the beavers? Why do they create these elaborate ponds and canals and lodges?
Yeah, so naturally beavers would be predated by things like wolves. So by creating all of this water, they're safe. The wolves won't go into the water, so while they're swimming around, they'll be safe. That's one of the reasons they create those canals, these channels of waterways, for them to navigate safely between bits of woodland or their pools and to get to their lodge. So in an ideal world for a beaver, I suppose everywhere is flooded. They can swim around and they'll be untouched, because they're pretty big, chunky animals, and once they're in the water, they're quite adept at swimming around, and they'd be quite safe. But out on the land, they're quite sort of bumbling. They don't have great eyesight. They're out at night anyway, so they can't really see. I don't think their hearing is particularly good. So yeah, in the water is where a beaver is happiest and safest.
So they just created a world that's safe for them.
Pretty much, yeah.
There's still some trees growing in the pond.
So some of them are dying back. Quite a few of them are alders, and beavers, famously, they don't like alders. Apparently they're quite bitter in flavour, so they tend not to fell those as much. And obviously they can tolerate the wet ground, and similarly with the oak, they can tolerate being coppiced by the beavers, and they can tolerate the wet ground that they're creating.
Have they got favourite trees?
I know they're meant to really like aspen. We don't have any of that here, but here they're eating a lot of oak. But they'll eat the birch as well. We've got silver birches that they've been felling. They don't seem to be touching out hazel, which is interesting.
Perhaps you could take me down to the lodge now.
Yeah.
So how big is the enclosure? I mean, it's obviously a lot bigger than the ponds that we can actually see.
Yeah, so the whole enclosure is about 30 acres. 10 acres of that is woodland. But their ponds are really just along this edge where the stream was and still is. But it's ever expanding. Now there's more of them with the kits in there as well. They've been a lot more busy, a lot more active. They might have more kits next year. So they need extra space for all of them to fit in. We might be better doing a big loop.
Yep, okay. We've just arrived a little bit downstream.
So I mean, from here we can just see an absolutely enormous pile of branches and tree trunks and things that they've brought in, and they just keep piling them on top of the lodge. And supposedly if you come on a really frosty day, if it's really, really frozen, you can see sort of water vapour coming out like a chimney, because they're all inside breathing away. But I've yet to see that. And then in the pools, we can see some of their larder. So they'll stick these branches and things, they put them in the mud at the bottom of the pool to secure them. And then I think they're just piling on top of that. So they'll eat that now, but they're stockpiling for the winter to make sure they've got enough food to keep them going.
That's extraordinary. And what sort of food do they store in the larder?
Lots and lots of branches. There's a lot of oak in there at the moment, like I was saying. So big branches, you see them on the camera trap swimming along with these huge branches. You think, gosh, that's quite heavy to move. So yeah, they're quite skilled at moving it all around. And they'll fell a tree and then they chop it up. They chop off the little branches and they bring those back first. And yeah, so they're eating the wood.
And do we know who's doing all the work? I mean, the babies are now...
They're probably sort of almost 5 months old, the beaver kits. So we have got videos of them swimming around with their own little branches, much smaller than the adults. But I think they'll be busy helping out with things. But as with human teenagers, how helpful they are, who knows?
Can you tell us a bit more about the impact of the ponds?
Yeah, so any source of water is really important for insects. A lot of insect life cycles use water at some stage. So we've been seeing, there's lots of insects here, and we've been seeing lots of bat activity as well, feeding over some of these ponds. We've got the odd camera trap video of a bat whizzing past. So that's been really nice, just sort of affirming to see, there's lots of insect life there, if there are bats feeding there. There's been lots of birds in the woodland here. We've had new species coming in and more as well, which has been really lovely.
So what's been coming in?
So we've had things like sedge warbler that we wouldn't have had here before. We've had grasshopper warbler as well, which are benefiting from sort of the scrub and the wetland that's created as a result of the beavers being here. But then another bird that's really benefited is the lapwing. So because they've created all this wetland in the field, it's created nice soft mud for lapwing to probe in. And then with the addition of the grazing, we had some water buffalo in here last winter, which grazed the grass down quite short. And then we had grey-lag geese just came in and they were grazing in here as well, this nice short grass which the lapwing needed to breed. So we've had quite a few lapwing chicks fledge out of here this year, which was really, really lovely to see.
And what about flood management?
Yeah, so beavers are really important as a natural flood management tool. So like we've been talking about, there's so much water held in their pools, and then as an extension of that being sent out into this field. So like I said before, it would have just run straight down into the main river. So if there was lots of rain up on the hill where this stream is coming from, it would have just flown straight down, straight into the river, down this straight channel. But now it all gets dispersed across this huge, across the whole 30 acres really, into the field, and there's just so much more capacity to store water, which is really important. So it can respond. We see a lot of fluctuation. When it was really wet a few weeks ago, the ponds here were really overflowing a lot, and there was a lot more water spread across the field. And now it's calmed down again. It gradually trickles down much more slowly into the river.
With flooding becoming such a common problem, you can only see beavers really being a huge advantage all over the place.
Yeah, I'd be keen to have more beavers, certainly. That's one thing we're hopeful for the future. So these beavers, they have to be inside an enclosure. So we've got this fence running around the whole 30 acres. But it would be really lovely if in the future we could take that fence down and say we can have beavers up and down the floodplain, because they would really benefit. You do lose some land to wetland, but it's got so many benefits for biodiversity that it really seems worth it.
Well, it sounds like they're doing really well. I mean, it's great that they've had kits for the first time. So, David, what do you think then? Are you and I going to see beavers in the wild in the northwest?
You've got to hope so. I mean, it really is down to a government decision about allowing free release. And, well, the last government went through all the benefits of having beavers in their report on the subject. And it's pretty overwhelming. So they really ought to get the finger out.
And we did a brilliant piece of work, didn't we, at the Trust, in mapping out all of that potential suitable beaver habitat, didn't we, within
Yeah.
Cumbria?
Yeah. In effect, you can model the places where beavers might want to live, and you can also model the places where beavers might cause problems, because beavers can cause problems. They do things that people don't much like, but those problems they cause are resolvable.
They can all be mitigated against, can't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that I see it in my lifetime, because it would be
Yeah.
brilliant. We should have beavers everywhere.
Well,
Yeah. All right, on most watercourses. Why not? You know, they were always there before, hunted to extinction 400 years ago. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know, we need to redress these things.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, next up, we're going to look at an animal that more people have probably had a chance of seeing. Now, lots of people still don't see them at all, and that's the red squirrel. And they're still hanging on in parts of Cumbria due to the fantastic work that's been done by our heroic volunteer red squirrel groups about the county. And Liz has been out this time to go and talk to Joss Adams, who's the red squirrel ranger at the High Close Arboretum near Grasmere.
Morning, Josh. So what are you up to?
Well, you're here today, a lovely dark day actually. It's quite dingy, which is great for thermal imagery. So we're using a thermal imager here to try and spot and locate our red squirrels this morning.
You're the red squirrel ranger, which sounds like a wonderful job.
It's a great job, yes. So I was posted in 2023 between the Grasmere and Grisdale route to look for red squirrel, monitor red squirrel and help red squirrel along the way, protect them from invasive species such as the grey squirrel. And over the last couple of years we've had highs, we've had lows, but we're currently doing really well. It's really good to see.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, Josh, so let's carry on and do what you normally do.
We're going to head over just about 300 metres over there, and there's a great patch of mixed woodland there. We've got a bit of broadleaf, some oak, we've got some beech, and we've got some very mature Scots pine and cedars as well. So there's every chance that they're going to be busy away caching food. So if we go quietly, we should see them.
Okay, let's have a look.
Oh, we've got something up there. So if I pass you the thermal imager, it'll give us a good example of what I'm looking at. On a dark, dingy day like today, you can see anything with a heat signature. So be it a bird, be it a mouse, be it something in a hole in a tree, it will allow you to see. As you can see, there's two pigeons just up there and a magpie up there, and we can't see them with the naked eye very well. But as soon as we put that thermal imager, it's very apparent that there's something in the tree.
Amazing.
And it's not just live creatures. You can actually see where things have been sitting. They often leave a trail behind them, and holes in trees, nests, you can see whether they're vacant or not. And it's a fantastic tool because it allows us to get involved and get up close to creatures without being too invasive. So I'm confident that there's only pigeons in that tree. We'll move on.
Okay.
Mind your step here, it's very slippery. The key to finding squirrels, I think, is they're expert foragers, so you have to move with the food. During summer is a very, very difficult time for them because the food is essentially dried up. Nothing's growing on the trees, it's only leaves. But as we move into autumn, the hazel starts growing, which is a lifeline for them. Oak starts dropping acorns, and beech trees start producing. And as you'll see on these pine trees this year, we've done very, very well. They're laden with pine cones. So this year, hazel didn't do very well at all. I think it was just so wet that food spoiled very quickly. Oak They don't necessarily thrive on oak, but they will enjoy it. I do see red squirrel with acorns in their mouth, but again, it's very important that the acorn is mature, it's fallen to the ground naturally, and the red squirrel will have to bury that for a number of weeks before it's able to actually digest it. And this year the beech mast has been the clear winner. And they've been thriving. You'll see them nibbling away at the small beech seeds. So if we move down here towards the beech trees, we'll sit for 5 minutes and we'll see what's happening.
Super.
As we walk, it's very difficult. You have to have eyes in the back of your head, but we're watching on the ground for any litter, food litter from squirrels. I can't quite see any yet, but we're looking for pine cones that have been stripped. I'm sure we'll find some later, but that's a sign that squirrel are in the area. We're looking for cracked hazelnut shells. By looking at the way the shell's been cracked, you can tell whether it's a squirrel, whether it's a wood mouse or something, so like that. So we're always casting our eyes down, but then of course we've got to keep our eyes up in the trees as well, because as they hear us coming, the first thing they'll do is climb halfway up a tree.
Tell me a bit about the red squirrels themselves.
They're obviously they're beautiful. Everybody who's seen a red squirrel will remember seeing it. It's obviously very rare, so when you do see a red squirrel, you remember it, don't you?
Absolutely.
They're territorial to a degree, so they don't really tolerate each other, so they don't live in great densities. The father doesn't really have much to do with upbringing the children. It's all down to mum. And generational skills is something that I've learned is really, really important. It's really important that mum teaches the kids how to survive, and that's the foraging skills and even the ability to crack a nut. It's not a natural ability, it has to be taught. So mum will hold the hazelnut in her mouth, and she'll encourage the kids to chew the hazelnut until eventually they crack it and they'll realise that there's food inside, and it's groundbreaking for them. Here we go, look here.
It's an old
This is
pine cone,
an
isn't
old
it?
pine cone, yeah. But as you can see here, it's been well stripped, so that's taken a squirrel quite some time. He's really worked at that, and maybe you see it's only half eaten there. Maybe he's been spooked by a bird that's flown overhead, or maybe he's just full for the time being. So a red squirrel needs about 20 grams of food a day. The grey squirrel needs about 100 grams a day.
Oh, wow.
Which is a staggering difference, and that's one of the big problems with red squirrels being displaced is the food competition. So if we look, that's been dropped from here, and if we take a look up, we'll be way up at the top up there, 50 feet high, nice vantage point, nibbling away. So occasionally you're sat under a tree and it's raining pine cones and it's a squirrel above you stripping away.
Josh, you talked about caching. Can you explain that?
Yes, so squirrels don't hibernate. They certainly are not as active as the daylight hours are reduced, a bit like us really. We've certainly got our feet up by the fire by 7 o'clock, haven't we? And squirrels are very much the same. They'll build well-insulated drays, their nest, lined with moss, leaves, and they put on a great big fluffy coat for the winter, and those famous ear tufts that we're all used to seeing, they only develop through the winter months. They don't have them in summer. But it's just another one of their tools to survive the winter months. So caching food is really important because food soon dries up. And if they didn't cache food, they wouldn't have the ability to eat and survive the winter. And at this time of year, it's all they do. They're just so busy, darting left, right and centre. And they'll often even pretend to bury things to put off other squirrels from digging up their own supply of nuts.
So caching's burying it for later.
Absolutely, yes, digging holes, and it's fascinating to watch. Actually, they do it at such speed, like a real frantic pace, one after the other. Dig, and you see them patting down the ground with their little tiny paws, and then on to the next one, and on to the next one. They'll just zoom backwards and forwards for day after day after day.
Fantastic.
So we're going to walk quietly down the way, and there's a little area very similar to this, and they're often busy doing their stuff there, so we'll head that way.
Okay.
Thermal's great for spotting them, and at this time of year you've got all these copper coloured leaves that have fallen, and of course you can see the red squirrels camouflage in action.
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't really spot them very well with the naked eye when they're sat stationary, but with the thermal imager it's a breeze, it really is. And then from there we transition to the binoculars, where we can get a magnified look at his coat, at his bushy tail. You can see all sorts of signs of whether he's older, younger. You can see injuries on them. We're not just looking, we're often using our ears as well. You'll hear a red squirrel maybe chasing each other away. They're quite vocal with each other, and you'll often hear the scratching on the bark of claws as they skitter up and down the trees. And that's the first sign for me that something's in the area. I think we've got one here. He's just down there. You can see the bushy tail. Can you see him just under the beech tree? Yes. Now we just have to see.
Yes, he is a red. So he's on the floor.
So he's on the floor. This is a great opportunity. We won't go much further because he hasn't spotted us. And as you can see, he's digging up the leaf litter here. So he's looking for food. And it's the early morning, so he might want his breakfast. He'll feed, and then as the day goes on, once he's full, he'll start burying food. But this is a great opportunity to sit and watch him. And there he goes across the path and up. So we'll walk a little bit closer, and I'll get the binoculars out. You see how he's come back?
He's gone back
So
again.
what he's just done there is he's picked up some food, and he's run up there and he's buried it there, and now he's run back again. So he's found the patch of food. It's right under a beech tree, so there's lots of beech mast under this tree that's fallen under the leaf litter, and he's finding it, and then he's zooming off. So I expect him to do exactly the same, but he'll go to a different point now.
There he goes.
There he goes. We'll see where he goes.
Over the path again.
Yeah. All day.
All day. Busy.
See how he goes back to his patch. So he's obviously found a decent hoard of food, and he's got a lot of work to do today, so I think we'll leave him to it.
Absolutely. It's been a good year for beech, you said. Beech must.
Beech has done well this year, yes. For the last couple of years, oak has done very, very well, and it's carpeted the ground. And unfortunately, whilst it's good that there's food, it's encouraged the invasive species. And whilst red squirrel breed once a year, this last couple of years, because of the mild weather and abundance of food, grey squirrel have bred 4 times a year.
4 times?
4 times a year. Red squirrel, on a good year, will have 2 litters. They'll usually have three kits. Grey squirrel, on the other hand, can have up to 8 at a time. So you can see that one grey squirrel could be responsible for way over 20 squirrels in a year. And when it comes to food competition, never mind disease transmission, if you leave these woodlands unchecked, it'll soon get out of hand, and we end up in a position where red squirrel can't survive.
So Josh, can you explain why the grey squirrels and the red squirrels can't coexist happily together?
The grey squirrel carry a disease known as squirrel pox. The grey squirrel has evolved with this disease and has developed immunity, whereas the red squirrel hasn't been able to do so. They haven't been able to share territory for long enough for the red squirrel to evolve and develop some form of immunity. And it's a very vicious disease, actually. We believe it's spread through saliva, through urine, and squirrels tend to scent to communicate with each other. They have scent glands. So if a grey squirrel's been sitting in a tree and it has squirrel pox and it scents on there, and a red squirrel turns up and smells it and it touches his nose and he licks his nose, that's a transmission route. You know, there's so many routes of transmission that it's just really no way for squirrels to coexist together. And it's heartbreaking to see it. I've seen reds and greys. They're friendly sometimes with each other and they do appear to be coexisting. But 2 weeks down the line, that red squirrel then starts to develop symptoms of squirrel pox. And they don't often die from the disease outright. It takes a couple of weeks, maybe 7-8 days. And it's the secondary infection. So they develop sores on their eyes will close up. And it's very, very sad to see. And they're unable to eat. And it's simply put, they starve to death. So it's awful, really. So we have to take measures to protect these last strongholds of red squirrel from grey squirrel.
I think you told me a figure earlier about how many you'd actually found in a square mile.
When I started this project, I arrived here at this arboretum and it was flooded with grey squirrel. And it turned out, after a couple of weeks of monitoring, there were only 4 individual red squirrel here. So we had to take some pretty quick action, really. We've removed, just from the arboretum itself, around 200 grey squirrel in 18 months. In the square mile, collectively, is 950. And we got up to, in the first year of supplementary feeding reds, protecting them from the greys, we got up to 19 individuals. So we went from 4 to 19. And then in December, squirrel pox did its rounds through the wood here, and we went back down to a couple of individual red squirrel. So it wiped them all out, and it shows you just how this conservation effort is always on a knife edge.
How many reds have we got here now, Josh?
We're very, very lucky here. Through the conservation efforts of Grasmere Red Squirrel Group, Westmoreland Red Squirrels and Cumbria Wildlife Trust efforts as well. From here over to the other side of Grasmere, we're looking at about 60 individuals, which is a remarkable number.
So Josh, what can we do to help?
If you do live in an area with red squirrels, I would encourage you to become a volunteer with Cumbria Wildlife Trust. You can come out with me for a couple of days and I'll show you the tactics and strategies that we use. But if you're unable to do that, I would say your sightings of reds and information on grey squirrel is super, super important. But I would also plead with people to not proactively go out and try and feed red squirrel. The less we do with red squirrel, the more we leave them to do what they want to do, the better they do. As soon as we start to try to help them out, we can end up luring them into gardens with cats, luring them across roads, luring them away from their young, feeding them the wrong food, and ultimately increasing the risk of squirrel pox transmission. So if you've got red squirrel, I plead, try not to encourage them. Let them be red squirrels.
Well, that's an incredibly in-depth report from Josh there, isn't it? And it just shows the kind of adversity that red squirrels are up against with this unending tide of grey squirrels. David, it seems like there might actually be a solution to the red squirrel problem, and it seems like what's been happening in Ireland is showing that we might eventually have found some way of bringing the red squirrels back.
Yeah. In Ireland, the recovery of pine marten populations seems to have enabled red squirrels populations to recover and started to sort of cause grey squirrel populations to decline away. And I don't think we're really sure of the mechanism by which that happens, but it's a definite effect.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about it, I was gobsmacked. But I mean, the evidence is there, is it not, that grey squirrels are disappearing at a phenomenal rate as pine martens spread. So not only are we bringing back a species that's missing from out of our countryside, but they're doing that ecological good by displacing the grey squirrels, and therefore the red squirrel populations seem to be bouncing back.
Yeah. And the same seems to be happening in Scotland as pine marten populations increase as well.
There has been sightings of pine martens back in Cumbria, hasn't there?
Yeah, so there's natural recolonisation from the Scottish population, very much in the same way as a sort of natural recolonisation of the otter population in the 1990s. So animals come over the border and gradually recolonise the place. There's also been a release of Scottish animals into Grisdale Forest.
So, just maybe we've actually turned a tide with red squirrel conservation. And I mean, potentially, this could actually mean that we get red squirrels back into much more of Britain.
Yeah. When we were setting up red squirrel conservation back in the 1990s, certainly amongst the sort of ecologists, I don't think there was an expectation that red squirrels would last this long.
No, found, and like I said before, only really due to the diligence of these brilliant red squirrel groups around the county do we still have these residual populations.
Yeah.
But hopefully now this is going to be the golden bullet. Is that what you call it? Well, thank you, David. That's great. Just a quick one at the end of each of these podcasts. We've been talking about what the best places to go to are this time of year and the best reserves to go. Have you got a favourite reserve or a favourite place?
I spend a lot of time on Falshall Moss, but that's just me being peculiar, I think. In terms of going to see wildlife, I think Walney is probably best this time of year.
Yeah.
Just because of all the waders and the wildfowl. It sort of got that thing of wildlife as spectacle.
Yeah.
You get out to Walney and just watch the waders swirling around.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another thing that I love about this time of year, November, December especially, is all the Scandinavian thrushes that come through to eat the yew berries,
Yeah,
especially on the limestone in the
yeah,
south of the county and
yeah,
some
yeah,
of our reserves, like
yeah,
up on Whitbarrow
yeah,
or Grubbins Wood or Brown Robin or
yeah,
Atterbarrow. All of those places, sometimes you can see these massive flocks of redwing and fieldfare
yeah,
passing through, and it can be one of those wonderful autumn winter wildlife spectacles, can't it?
yeah. That thing of thousands and thousands of thrushes going by.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really special. Excellent.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much, David. That's been brilliant. I've just got to say a big thank you to Elizabeth at Lowther and to Josh being so knowledgeable about their subjects and being so committed about their subjects as well. And a big thanks to Liz, our roving producer, who went out and did the interviews. Like I always say, if you like the podcast, give us a like on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you. Mail at cumbriawildlifetrust.org.uk. If you've got any ideas about the podcast, about things you'd like to hear in the future, then just get in touch. That would be really good. So it's a massive goodbye from me and a goodbye from David. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Goodbye.